Welcome to Vernacular Verbose, Jethro Tull podcast. My name's Joey Vetter.
My name's Eugene Manko.
And today we're continuing our deep dive, as always, of the Tull discography with WarChild, released in 1974. I think there's a couple unique things that we can say about this one right off the bat, but the first thing that strikes me, Eugene, is that this is kind of a reaction to the critical reception of A Passion Play, this album. What do you think about that?
It kind of does, and I think both to the critical reception of A Passion Play and of the fact that they felt that conceptual prog rock was on its way out.
Mm-hmm.
But what's curious is that one of the most obvious song that feels like a reaction to criticism was written before even A Passion Play came into being. But all in all, I think we will find a couple stories in the Tull discography where a transition from one album to another felt like a reaction to criticism.
Yeah, and I think kind of a bigger issue is that transitions in the Tull discography kind of seem like a big deal, just because there's been so many different eras of the band and so many different styles that when they change from one to the other, when you kind of look at the discography from a macro perspective, it seems like a big deal. But I mean, maybe if you were following the band at the time, maybe it didn't seem like that big a deal. Or maybe it did, I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe it felt like something that you've been expecting.
Yeah, but the reason that I say that it's a reaction to Passion Play, so I think most people know this, but Passion Play was savaged by critics when it first came out. For a lot of them were giving arguments that it was too pretentious or it was too abstract or too over the top, that kind of thing. And so I think just from an objective perspective, WarChild is different in that it's going back to the normal track-by-track album with just relatively short songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could call it a concept album. And that, again, I think most Tull fans know this, but WarChild was planned at the beginning to be sort of a companion piece to a film that the band was going to write and produce, also called WarChild. But the film fell through, but the soundtrack still kind of came out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of an interesting thing, because on some tracks it feels like there's some kind of theme, some kind of characters maybe that are sort of being sketched out, but they're not really consistent through the whole album. And that's something which Tull has done a lot, I think, where they've sort of started a concept album, but they never really commit all the way to it. What do you think?
Yeah, same thing with Too Old to Rock and Roll, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
With this album, I have a couple of funny stories. This is largely irrelevant to everything, but this was one of the vinyl records that we used to have when I was a kid. And since, no internet and no otherwise available information, we actually had this record only with an inner sleeve with the lyrics printed on it and the large WarChild kind of insignia in the middle. And I didn't realize that. I thought that was the cover. And I didn't see the cover art until much later. And even when I saw the cover art, I still thought, I had it in my head that was kind of a variant, like a US pressing or something, that the cover art was lyrics on black background with WarChild in the middle. And it took me to do a Discogs dive to try and find that variant, and then finally realize, oh god, it was just the inner sleeve.
That's funny. The cover art for this one is funny. I think, let me just ask you first what you think about the cover art, the real cover art.
I sort of have a picture in my mind of this album, of the kind of world it represents. And it doesn't really marry in my mind with this cover, because the cover it has a modern city, and I don't picture a modern city when I listen to the album. And the other things don't really bother me. I mean, the negative picture of Ian and inverted color and all that stuff, it's very much in the vein of some Tull covers, like Too Old to Rock and Roll again. Just a character, Ian, or a character looking like Ian doing something expressively. But the kind of modern skyline kind of clashes for me with the content of the album.
Yeah, I hate the cover art, honestly. It just feels so low effort. It kind of feels like it was put together at the last second and they didn't really know what else to do. And the whole negative picture thing, I mean, maybe that was something which was a lot cooler in the 70s, but it's obviously not cool now.
I think there are a couple of pressings, not either unofficial or that just were issued in some like small countries where the picture isn't negative, where it's a positive image.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. Would you want the cover art be like just the inner sleeve, or do you know what that looks like?
It sounds familiar. I think it's just the logo mostly, right?
Yeah, it's the logo, that kind of cast iron thing in the middle,
Yeah.
and black background and lyrics all around it. Kind of cool.
But I also am thinking of the back cover, if you remember what that looks like.
Yeah, I do.
Which it has a bunch of different people, some of whom are the band, some of whom are record company people, and others. And if I remember right, they're all making pictograms of the different songs. So like there's a Sealion on the back, and there's like a queen on the back. I think they're kind of like representing the tracks. I didn't look at that closely enough to kind of examine whether all of the tracks are represented. I kind of went through it and read about who the characters were. I think Deep Palmer is pretty hilarious on that one, kind of a prophet figure next to Ian Anderson. In general, this album, it's a little bit of a stitched together album, and that I don't know if it's fair to say a lot, but a couple of the tracks are taken from the Chateau sessions, which just a quick explainer for anyone who doesn't know what that is. When Tull were making the album, which was to follow Thick as a Brick, they initially went to France at the Chateau. I'm not going to try to say that because I'm going to mispronounce it, but you can look it up. They went to this famous Chateau studio in France to record the next album, and they recorded quite a lot of material. But for various reasons, they weren't happy with the studio or the material, and so they came back to the UK and essentially started from scratch on what ended up being a Passion Play. But that's a long way of explaining that some of the tracks on WarChild were taken from those older sessions, actually predating Passion Play, and were sort of paired with newer tracks that were made after Passion Play. So in that sense, it's kind of a stitched together album, which makes it a little uncohesive, I think.
Probably, yeah. Even, I should say, the exact track that were recorded at Chateau d'Hérouville.
Yeah, thanks.
Because there are a couple like recording artifacts on these that are the same. I compared them, but I think we shall talk about Chateau when we come to Nightcap, because I would love that very much.
Yeah.
Another thing, I'm looking at the back cover right now, and when I called the logo, the WarChild logo, cast iron, I obviously meant that it looks like cast iron, and it kind of is painted to look like such, but it's obviously a foam prop, because on the back cover Ian is holding it up high and we can clearly see it's not very heavy.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to that thing.
Yeah.
So I have to say, on this episode, I'm going to have to rely on you quite a bit, Eugene, because to be honest, WarChild is probably my least favorite Tull album of the 70s, and as a result, it's not one I've listened to that much. The last time I heard it, before I listened to it last night for this podcast, was probably several years ago, like listening from front to back. So I don't have a lot to really say about it. I have my reactions, of course, and I have tracks I like and I have tracks I don't. But in general, I can't say I'm an expert on this album the way I am on a lot of other Tull records. Well,
I'm pretty familiar with it because, as I said, this was one of the records that we used to have, and I listened to all of these pretty much the same amount. So WarChild, To All to Rock and Roll, Stormwatch, Benefit, Broadsword and the Beast, these ones, when I was a kid. And yeah, I can't say this is an album that really stands out to me, but one of the things, a friend of mine, the drummer in my band, this is kind of one of his favorite Tull albums. And I was pretty surprised by that as well. And I asked him why he felt that way. And what he said was that to him, it kind of feels like the pinnacle of the kind of joyful, song-oriented art rock that Tull were doing. Not even prog rock, not kind of overwhelming in the way that Passion Play or Minstrel in the Gallery feels to him, not to me. But a very joyful, very poised and elegant, kind of light-hearted and cheerful record.
Yeah.
This is what he loves about it. So, take it or leave it.
That was something I was going to bring up, was that when I listen to this album, one of the things that strikes me about what makes it different from other albums in the discography is it kind of feels like it's the peak of like bombastic Tull, or like sort of a lighthearted, very, very British, I think, bombastic aesthetic for Tull.
Yeah, on songs like Queen and Country and the Third Hoorah,
Yeah.
very much so.
And I actually do think, maybe it's a little strange to say this, but I think there are some connections with an album like this and Minstrel in the Gallery. Just the difference is that the tone is totally different. Whereas on Minstrel in the Gallery is much more somber and dark and serious, and this one is very much not serious, but I think there's some musical similarities.
And lyrical. I'll come to that. I found a very interesting connection between a song on WarChild and a song on Minstrel in the Gallery.
Cool. So with the band member lineup, we're going into the fourth album of the Jeffrey lineup. So still not a lot of big changes here, but Ian Anderson on acoustic guitar, flute, and vocals, Martin Barr on electric guitar.
And saxophones.
Yeah, saxes are back. Jeffrey Hammond on bass guitar, John Evans on keyboards, and Barry Barlow on drums. Track 1, WarChild.
WarChild, dance the days and dance the nights away.
So the first thing I want to talk about on this one, of course, is the long spoken word sound collage intro. What's your feeling on that?
Well, since I feel like since the movie didn't happen, they wanted to make the album feel more like a soundtrack to a non-existent movie, like a sort of a not a concept album, but a kind of a conceptual gesture, a framing device, and that's what it's there for. But also that's beginning that with a domestic scene, just people talking about having a cup of tea, and then the sounds of war and battle, and then the music that drowns out these sounds. I think it kind of illustrates what a lot of the songs on the album are about. Because WarChild, as a song, feels like a song about, well, it's a little decadent. It's the kind of an abandon of indulgence in the middle of catastrophe, in the middle of war which surrounds it.
Yeah.
And the fact that it begins with the sound collage of an air raid, right, or what that is, and then they are singing about dancing the nights away. We are kind of picturing a world surrounded by war, but with people who live in the middle of it and get on with their lives and celebrate them. And it's kind of decadent and a little. On this song already, I'm starting to picture a kind of an Elizabethan, maybe steampunk or diesel punk setting with this kind of war being waged around the city with the airplanes and maybe blimps, and a high society celebrating and not having a care about people who are dying around, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. This song has always had kind of like an apocalyptic feel to me, just kind of based off the lyrics, I guess, and the intro and all that. Specifically about the intro, just the thing I think is funny about it is how the husband is so obviously Ian. Like, it's so obviously not someone trying to act like some persona, it's just Ian. And I assume that wasn't intentional, but it didn't work very well, whatever they were trying.
Well, I think they could have been just putting themselves into that picture.
Yeah.
And again, a collage of themselves and of the story. But the song bears, I think, multiple interpretations. We could look at it as if it's that picture that I just described. But there's another kind of angle. There's a lot of "let me" in the lyrics.
Yeah.
Let me dance in your teacup, open your windows, and I'll walk through your doors. Let me live in your country, let me sleep by your shores. It's the sort of, can be also interpreted as the view of love as conquest, and of the warlike destruction that's wrought by blind desire.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice that, well, that makes the song not really straightforward. It makes it have different layers, which I like.
Yeah, I think specifically about the WarChild, the theme. I mean, I don't really understand what the concept of WarChild is. It's not something that comes across clearly in the album, of course. So I don't know if there's things in here which were I assume this is one of the songs that was sort of intended to be linked more heavily to the film, which was never made, and that kind of thing.
I think what they said about the film, that the lyrics and the songs weren't meant to directly connect with the movie, but they could be kind of finagled into the context.
Yeah.
I think the music in the song, in the actual song, not in the sound collage before it, also works very well with the kind of theme of celebration in the middle of catastrophe, because what we're hearing is, in the verse, we have sort of a lot of minor roots. If you just spell out the roots of the chords that they use, you'll see just a minor key in there. But they are all harmonized with major chords. All the chords in the verse are major. And it's something that's done in blues, but in a very different way. Blues is one way to combine major and minor, and this is another way to combine major and minor. It's kind of a different sort of modal mixture. And on Dance the Nights Away, we have an actual shift to minor. So the whole song has a kind of defiant, optimistic tinge in it, and it's a little bit deranged because of that.
I agree.
It's because we have this ambivalence, this duality of major and minor throughout the entire song in different ways.
Yeah. I wanted to mention the drum part as well, because one thing that struck me listening to this album last night was that the drum parts on this album are really impressive. And I mean, that's not something uncommon for Barry Barlow, but it kind of struck me that this album may have some of the most difficult Tull drum parts, like across the album, like technically difficult. And this song, I think, is sort of a classic example of a Barry Barlow drum part, where it's something just totally off the wall and weird, but it ends up working. And it's interesting how he's using kind of a, I don't know what other way to describe this, but sort of the disco hi-hat pattern, the open hi-hat, which is not something that he does commonly. So it's kind of a rare example of him doing some technique like that.
And it doesn't really sound like disco.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Do you get a sort of Elizabethan feel from the music on this album?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stood out to me was the diversity of the instrumentation, which was not something that I remember before hearing this album before. And so, yeah, I think especially on other tracks like the next one, I think there's a very big Elizabethan sort of influence. Although that being said, the way that the saxophone is used on not just this album, but this song particularly, it's very kind of like 50s rock and roll. Like, if you think of like the Rocky Horror Picture Show soundtrack, it's, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I'm not a fan of the movie, but I think the soundtrack is brilliant. The way that they used saxophones and sort of paying homage to those 50s rock and roll style, it's kind of the same thing that's going on here, which now that I think about it, those two things, Rocky Horror Picture Show and this album, are kind of happening around the same time. That's interesting.
Wasn't Rocky Horror a little bit earlier?
Maybe a year or two?
Yeah, I love the movie. I wouldn't call myself a straight-up fan, but it's a brilliant movie, I think. My biggest recollection of the saxophone in Rocky Horror is Meatloaf's solo part, Hot Patootie.
Yeah, that's a great song.
And it doesn't really... That's a straight-up rock and roll, and this is, to me, it's kind of different from this one, because Ian is not really a rock and roll sax player.
Yeah,
doesn't feel to me like that. What he did with the saxophone was more of a kind of not rock and roll and not jazz. It's more of a kind of a classical sound, the sound of classical saxophone as applied to rock music. It feels to me like that. So it's not really a wild kind of wailing saxophone.
But there's also kind of examples of that same kind of rock and roll homage style later on. I mean, really, I mean, only just in Too Old to Rock and Roll, probably that's kind of the last time you see that kind of thing. But
yeah, and Ian got so tired of playing the sax that he asked Dee to play from a dead beat.
Track 2, Queen and Country.
To me, this one, it kind of reinforces the sort of world building that happens in the previous song. I'm still not saying that this is a concept album or anything, but as a complete work, it paints a picture in my mind, and this is what I kind of want to talk about. This song is a very straight up exploration of an attitude of romanticism towards war and conquest.
Yeah.
A kind of a naive colonial fascination that's happening in that world that we are looking at. Again, a kind of a high society, a kind of a diesel punk sort of setting. But I am still perceiving another layer in that. We've got this line, "It's been this way for 5 long years as we signed our souls away." Is it a is this Ian reminiscing on the touring life? Because 5 long years is about the amount of time that they've spent together as a band.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. I was going to bring up that lyric, the sense we signed our lives away thing, because I was wondering what the lyrics are supposed to be about in that sense.
Yeah, it's not very well. It could be talking about. We could interpret it straightforwardly as about people, the soldiers being conscripted.
Yeah.
To fight for that country to whom they're bringing riches and stuff. But why 5 long years? Why that specific?
Yeah.
Why bring that up? That number. This one is kind of, the music feels, when I examine it closely, because I mean I'm very familiar with this song, you know, since I was a kid, and I'm not sure whether it feels like it flows well for me just because I know it so well, or is it because something is happening there? Because if you look at the kind of separate elements of it, it's a little improbable, because all the musical elements in it kind of disjointed. The groove is quite heavy, it has a lot of stops in it, and sort of nothing carries out through the song besides the vocals.
Yeah.
It's all connected only by the vocals, but it still feels together. It feels like it has a flow and a forward motion, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is one of those songs that I think really defines that British bombastic nature of this album. Probably this one more than any other, I'd say, probably.
Yeah, it's kind of pompous, and it serves the world building to me.
And I picked out the accordion to talk about, but then as I listened on, I saw there's accordion all over this album, so it's nothing.
Yeah, this is the accordion album.
Yeah.
In Tull discography. I don't think there's any prominent accordion on any other records in this amount.
And I liked the strings on this one too. They're kind of like, they're building up, reaching towards the sky, and it sounds kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. And if we look at what's actually happening there in the harmony, the song modulates between D minor, E minor, and F sharp minor, and it does that back and forth. It begins in D, then switches up a half step to E. So it's plain modulation. We're not kind of changing the key color or anything. We just D minor, then a step up E minor, then a step up F sharp minor, and then back to E minor, and it kind of oscillates. And I don't really know any other famous songs that do that. Mm-hmm. Not that Queen and Country is a massively famous song, but it's not a very usual harmonic device to do that in such a manner. Normally, these kind of upward modulations happen once to just bring energy to a song, but here we're going back down and then going back up again, and it's kind of that back and forth movement.
Yeah, I actually find it a bit grating on my ear, to be honest.
Really? Uh-huh.
The way that happens.
Well, maybe they were going for something, but it doesn't work for everyone. Mm-hmm. Or they did it just, for the sake of changing it around and tried it out. It is a little bit of a strange song. Mm-hmm. A little bit of a strange song musically.
Track 3, Ladies.
Ladies of leisure, with their eyes on the back roads, all looking for strangers.
So the thing that's most immediately apparent is the stock cafe sound at the beginning, which is interesting. Uh-huh. It sounds like it was clearly just taken out of a stock sound library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't found anything about that sound in the notes. Maybe I wasn't looking well enough, but I mean, it didn't make much sense for them to go into a cafe or stage anything just to acquire that.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember when Daft Punk did their last album, there was some story about how they spent like $200,000 on a microphone to record inside a restaurant or something.
Never heard of that.
The thing that stuck out to me, there's a couple things on this one. Mm-hmm. I think number one, this sounds pretty film soundtracky, this song. Uh-huh. And I really liked the percussion because there's a lot of a variety of different sort of quirky percussion. There's sleigh bells and very prominent hand claps and castanets, which come back from Passion Play. I thought it was kind of cool.
It kind of sounds like the most of all on this album. This sounds like kind of salon music, for want of a better word. The kind of the prominence of strings, accordion, and saxophone. It's very acoustic, and they clearly felt that this kind of sound was a little too much, and they inserted a groovy moment at the end of the song.
Yeah, it's another kind of like 50s rock and roll type.
That one's like very much so. And again, it's not so much a musical moment, I think, in this song, than a world-building moment. This is the kind of music you would hear in this world.
I think it's the acoustic guitar sounds quite Spanish, actually, at times, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Let me just double check. Isn't Martin credited with Spanish guitar on this one?
Oh.
I may be confusing it with another album where he is credited with Spanish guitar, but he is credited, yes, electric and Spanish guitars.
Cool.
So yeah, you're bang on. There's a very odd moment in this song, which is an utterance at the very end.
Yeah.
I cranked it up and listened like 10 times. I can't make out what that person is saying.
It sounded like French to me.
Oh, did it? That is strange.
But yeah, I assumed that was something that was picked out of the same stock library that the cafe sound came from, but what do I know?
That is interesting.
But yeah, I wrote down what is the French at the end, because I only listened to it once, but it sounded like French to me.
It doesn't. Well, it could be French, but it doesn't sound like any kind of complete word or phrase to me. Not sure if it's French, really. At least not anything I would recognize. But what do I know?
Track 4, Backdoor Angels.
In and out of the front store and 12 backdoor angels. There was a golden bride.
I shall begin by saying I absolutely love this song. There's so much different stuff in this one. My first note related to this is that synth line. Oh my god, the one in the first verse. It just comes out of nowhere and doesn't repeat anywhere else in the song, and it's just such a beautiful sound. In this song, in the kind of lyrical side of this, I read what Ian has to say about this, and let me tell you, I'm not half confused by what he's saying about. It doesn't really make much sense to me personally in the context of this song. What I'm quoting again, it's got that Florence Nightingale with nice tits, short skirt and sexy legs kind of thing going on. It's some kind of imaginary description of a person who's really not in it for the money, but it's a concoction. I mean, he's the author of the song. He probably has this imagery in his head, but this has nothing to do with what I draw from this song. To me, this is kind of keeping on with the world building thing, and this song is the kind of mythology or conjecture of that world. This is the characters that exist in it, but we can't be sure that they're real. It's what people tell each other about these backdoor angels that exist there and help people out in various ways. We could probably, break the metaphors in it down to a more mundane description, but in this case, I kind of feel it will do the song no good at all. It's if this is a look at real life characters, it's a look through a prism of fantasy, and the world of this album is better for it. At least I think that.
Yeah, so you see it as more of a fantasy thing as opposed to a real world description.
Yeah, I'm seeing that as stories told by inhabitants of this world about these creatures, whoever they are.
Yeah, like I mentioned, this album is one I'm not familiar with, and so when I listen to it, on the rare occasion that I do, it's a little bit like listening to a new album for the first time in terms of how I can react to it. And when I listened last night, this was kind of the one track that I wasn't very familiar with, which I came away liking quite a lot. So this, of the songs that I wasn't familiar with, this is kind of a standout for me. And I like that you mentioned the synthesizer, because the synthesizer, to me, I wrote down that it kind of sounds like something from Passion Play from the past album.
Yeah.
Kind of those rare synthesizers which you don't hear a lot of that kind of sound in other Tull work.
Yeah, and I feel there's another kind of musical connection, because on the solo of the keyboards, it kind of feels like the same effect that we heard on Thick as a Brick on the flute in Believe in the Day. There's a kind of splitter or a very heavy square wave tremolo that just goes.
Yeah.
So it kind of connects to the past albums in more than one way.
I like the bass line during, I guess you'd call the bridge sections, which the keyboard also comes in on. I think that's a really good moment.
Yeah, there are a number of cool bass lines on WarChild, I feel.
And it's interesting, there's lots of like sudden hangs in this song, where they'll just hang and you're not really sure when they're coming back, but they do. And there's also a moment where the track just kind of goes quiet in the middle and then kind of resets itself, which is also quite interesting.
Well, it kind of draws you in as a listener more, because you've been expecting one thing and then it's kind of sublimely taking it from another direction, or from the same direction that we've had before, but in a slightly different way.
There's also a lot of really crazy fills from Barry that go on and on, like for measures and measures and measures, and he's somehow still keeping time in the middle of all of that. And I mean, I don't know if Tull ever used a click as a band. I kind of doubt they were a click band. Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sometimes they clearly did, like that story when they were recording Locomotive Breath, where it was crucial not to speed up. But yeah, I'm not sure what the click situation was for them back in the day. They clearly perform to a click these days, because they've got the video sync and pre-recorded sections playing along.
Yeah, God, everybody plays to a click now. Like since I've come to Japan, I played in like 3 or 4 bands, and like every single band, the entire set is to a click. It's like a new way of working for me.
Yeah, I don't know. We with my band, we rehearse to a click. And we record to a click, but we don't perform to a click, because, you know, for us in performance, it feels more important to just feel each other.
Yeah, that's becoming more of a rarity today among a lot of bands.
Yeah, kind of a shame.
I think the ending vocal here is pretty interesting. The really weird vocal delivery about the winking eye.
Yeah, kind of a little bit of breaking the fourth wall, you know, because it feels closer, and it feels like Ian is talking to us,
right?
Specifically addressing us, and this is not the only moment where I feel, you know, the fourth wall is breaking on this album, but in this way, only once.
One thing I know about this song is that it was played live for a long time in the band set, which is quite interesting, because there's not a lot of songs off this album that really made it into the live set. It's kind of this and Skating Away is pretty much it.
Didn't they play Bungle? I
don't think they did. I mean, maybe they did on the tour, but I don't. Not after that.
Yeah, I know Ian kind of got not tired of that song, but he wished someone else would have written it.
Yeah, but Backdoor Angels, I think they were playing it as late as the Songs from the Wood tour, at least.
That's pretty cool.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm not very much a kind of live bootleg sort of person, so I may be unfamiliar with live sets. And obviously, I wasn't around and wasn't there.
Yeah, I wish I could have been.
All of the shows were happening. So,
track 5, Sealion.
Mountains and under the sky, riding dirty grey horses, go you and I, meeting with chance.
So the only story I really have about this song is I have another story from my dad, my Tull-loving dad, which I remember him when I was a kid telling me a story about this song, which is quite interesting because my dad isn't a huge fan of this album either. He doesn't really talk about it that much, but I remember him telling me that when he was a kid, or a teenager rather, he was a big sports guy. He would play baseball, basketball, that kind of thing. And he told me that when he was, I guess in college, when he was playing baseball and when he was pitching, he would use the lyrics of this song as kind of his wind up to pitch. So as he was sort of getting ready to pitch, he would sing to himself, you know, what is it, like over the
mountains,
over
and
the
under
mountains.
the sky.
Yeah, he would sing that to himself every time, and so I've always associated that song with that story from him.
I can see how that could work, because this is the kind of pump. This song could pump you up really well. That's cool. The drums, I think, in this one are also pretty crazy. There are a few places where just Barry just absolutely goes wild.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of double bass.
Uh-huh.
Although it could be toms too, I don't know. But there's lots of just like complete walls of either bass or tom notes, which is something that Barry got quite good at around this like mid-70s period.
I don't know what it is with the camel case in the name of this song. WarChild too, but WarChild is a kind of a neologism, that they coined for the album, so sort of it doesn't make much sense, but okay, they wrote it as one word, but with a capital letter in the middle. But Sealion, they did the same, and it's kind of, why? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Like the way it was spelled?
Yeah, it's spelled. Yeah, it's spelled not as two words, but as one word, but L is capitalized.
Oh, I haven't noticed that. So it's like just one word, but lion has a capital L.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have a kind of a theory about that, because this song kind of has a slightly different metaphor for what's going on in the song WarChild, because it's also a bit of defiance, a bit of fiddling while Rome's burning. All of this celebration, all of this carnival happening in the midst of catastrophe, but the catastrophe here is already more sort of climate oriented. And here's the thing I found about the lyrics of this song. This is not my discovery. I found it on Genius.com, submitted by someone named Priest and Pimp, and what they write is about the line, "As you light your cigarette on the burning deck." They write, a likely reference to the poem Casabianca by Felicia Dorothy Hemans, which was required reading and memorization for many years in English and Scottish schools. The first line, the most famous, goes, "The boy stood on the burning deck, whence all but he had fled." They go on Genius.com to explain more about this and what they think about it. But to me, I would kind of maybe brush this off. I would scarcely believe this connection and call it 10 years. But when I read this line, I made a connection to a different Tull song, because the boy stood on the burning deck. On Baker Street Muse, we've got "There was a little boy stood on a burning log." Yeah. And this leaves me with zero doubts that burning deck here is a reference to the same poem, because Ian makes a different reference to a very much clearer, different reference to this poem in another song.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I don't really think that besides the image, there's a lot of... We could draw much comparison from this reference, because lighting a cigarette on the burning deck is a very it's a kind of a self-contained gesture of defiance and of the same kind of fiddling while Rome is burning, or smoking as your ship is burning down. So yeah, that's the tidbit of trivia that I found. I was quite fascinated by.
Yeah, when you said that, I also immediately thought of that line from Baker Street Muse, because that's one of my favorite parts of that medley.
Are you familiar with the poem, or is it not something?
No, never heard of it.
This song too, it kind of oscillates between minor and major. I just wrote that down. I already don't remember much about how exactly it does that.
Is it the accordion carnival music part?
Yeah, it is, and you balance the world on the tip of your nose. This is where it goes full major. That's the part, and in the verse it's more minor, and it goes somewhere in between. So again, it has that parallel with WarChild, with how tonal colors are employed to convey the feeling of, mirth among destruction.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, because it does actually sound quite destructive, even though it's a bit of a happy song, which you can maybe say that about a lot of this album.
Yeah.
But I like this song overall. I mean, it's not... I don't know if I'd call it a standout, but I don't think it's bad. Part of it, I think it's just cute to have a song about a sea lion. I think part of that is why I like it. But
did you listen to Sealion too?
No, I have a file of that somewhere, but I haven't heard it.
That's a fun one. Very different. They even kind of... I don't think they draw a lot of comparison between these two songs or describe them as being connected, but, well, they obviously are. But I think Sealion 2 was the one where a lot of lyrics were actually written by Jeffrey. And yeah, so it has a much different feel to it.
Yeah.
You should listen to that.
I don't remember the "Would you like another cup of tea" ending the the song. I don't remember hearing that on previous listens of this album, so that was kind of surprising to me. And I'm assuming the reason that's there is because this was the end of the first side of the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it kind of wraps up and segues into Skating Away.
Yeah. Track 6, Skating Away on the Thin Ice of the New Day.
Skating away, skating away, skating away on the thin ice of the new day.
It's kind of constructed in a very parallel way to WarChild because it begins the second side of the record. So we have a kind of a lengthy intro, which is non-musical, which is kind of a musique concrète of a person making a cup of tea and humming to themselves. Again, obviously Ian Anderson.
And it's very annoying today, I think, when you want to listen to this song and there's that 30-second intro.
It's fine.
But it's one of those things where, you know, having to separate your album into two sides was something which was obviously a limitation of the technology of the time. And it's interesting how, you know, so many of these albums were based around that limitation. So, for example, you know, you have these little vignettes, which I think are clearly put there to mark the two sides. Mm-hmm. It's interesting what the album would be like today if that limitation wasn't there.
Yeah, clearly it would have been different. But, well, today, maybe not today, but like in the 90s or early 2000s when nobody was planning for vinyl, because today people begin to plan for vinyl again.
Yeah, and not even just that, but also runtime. Mm-hmm. That I think it's easy to forget that the reason that so many of these albums are, you know, 40 to 46, 47 minutes is because of the limitation of vinyl runtime.
Yeah.
And we kind of see that in Tull more so in the 80s when some albums start getting extra tracks on the CD version and that kind of thing.
Well, a very kind of happy coincidence for me because that kind of album length to me feels optimal.
Yeah, I agree.
I always get kind of overwhelmed by hour-long albums. All right, so Skating Away. In this one we are breaking the fourth wall again, and this time through lyrics. Because when we go, Ian goes about the story's too damn real and in the present tense, and you're the only person sitting in the audience.
Yeah.
We should remember this was a track that was written during the Chateau sessions, so it has the theme of theater, of life as theater, of people as spectators or actors, or both at the same time. So this is reminiscing on that. But when Ian talks about that, he always says that this is the climate change song.
Yeah, global cooling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was believed so at the time.
And which doesn't come across to me at all in the lyrics. Like, I mean, I would never think that unless I read Ian Anderson saying that.
Yeah, I agree, because it bears different interpretations, and this is what makes the song make more sense than it maybe did to Ian even when he was writing it. Mm-hmm. Because you can look at it in very different ways, in more generalized ways and in more concrete.
Yeah, lyrically, this is one of my favorite Ian songs, lyrically. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of the lyrics are fantastic on this song.
Yeah, I agree. It's beautiful.
And to me, it's similar to the same theme as Thick as a Brick, where I think it's very much a coming-of-age story, because it's about, you know, leaving your childhood or past behind and moving on into a more dangerous world and that kind of thing. Yeah, with things that are bigger than us and out of our control. Yeah. And it rhymes very much with WarChild, with the WarChild theme, but this time the things that are bigger than us and out of our control are not war, but climate change and what's happening with the world. Mm-hmm. Still kind of man-made, like war is man-made, but the feeling of being overwhelmed, the feeling of being smaller than the world, the kind of acute sensation of that is what I take away from this song. Also, we could compare it, the metaphor of the thin ice, the optimism on this album. There are the lyrical themes in some places, in some of the songs are quite dark, and this one, speaking about the climate change, like Ian wanted to do, there is foreboding in that. But I think kind of Ian's optimism and the optimism in general on this album shines through, because if we compare a different songwriter employing this same metaphor of the thin ice, you know, Roger Waters, when he wrote, "If you should go skating on the thin ice of the modern life, don't be surprised when a crack in the ice appears under your feet." And for Ian, no, it's just skating away. Just there is a future for him Yeah, that's the only kind of connection that I see between the whole global cooling thing and this song is the metaphor of the thin ice. I think this is a great song. I think it's better live though, and there's been a couple live versions of this. I think a lot of Tull fans probably know, but this was the song that for whatever reason they kind of all switched instruments when they played this live.
Yeah.
So John Evans played drums on this song live, and someone else who wasn't the bass player played bass. I can't remember who. But so that song's always been kind of interesting on that. But there's a couple things they added in the live version, which I think makes a big difference. So there's sort of like there's not really delay, but there's like delayed vocals on Ian, which I think help add to the atmosphere of the song a lot. And there's sort of a new electric guitar part, which I think is very sort of striking in the live
Do you mean the
version,
slide that happens between the lines? That goes, meanwhile, back in the year one, boing.
Yeah, I think so. And also just the chords of the electric guitar are playing are very sort of striking in your face in the live version. I think it helps a lot.
Oh, well, because in the studio version, the electric guitar is much quieter than all the acoustic instruments, and it's used purely for texture and not for power, which is impossible to do. During a live performance, because the electric guitar will overpower things, so they had to accommodate for that, because you can't just bring it down. I don't really like the slides in the live version, the one in between the first lines of the song. I think they kind of sort of ruin it for me. In the studio version of this, there's so much space. I like how the stereo field is manipulated, how we've got this bang that the acoustic guitar does before the words in the present day, and the xylophone that goes from one ear to another on the first chorus. The rhythm in this one is kind of cool because it's very ambivalent. The song is in 4/4. If you just close your eyes and go 1, 2, 3, 4 throughout the entire song, it all works out. But to me, the chorus never feels like the one is on the one. For me, I kind of always feel like the one in the chorus is on the word way, like skating away. That's the one. But if you count it just like a conductor counting out 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the one is on the word skating.
Yeah,
and it's really cool how, again, it follows the lyrics. It's one of the rhythmic, I think, things that Ian does. The rhythm follows the lyrics and is not necessarily confined to a grid.
I think of all the songs on the album, this one has some of the most diverse instrumentation because there's so much stuff going on. You have some kind of Indian percussion with xylophones and marimbas
and tablas, I think.
Yeah. What sounds like a slide acoustic guitar later on. When the drums and bass come in, which the place where they come in is quite interesting. It's kind of random.
Yeah, and, but it's such a cool place. You're a rabbit on the run, and it goes.
Yeah.
Just
Barry is playing
gear.
brushes, which is really rare for him. I can't think of another instance where he did that.
Yeah, that's funny. I never thought of that. It must be, yeah. Maybe I think on you will find if you listen to the outtakes, well, not outtakes because these aren't outtakes from WarChild, but the bonus tracks, and this one appears, I think, also on 20 Years of Jethro Tull and some other outtake compilations, quartet.
Oh yeah, I can't remember what that sounds like, but I know I've heard it.
It sounds a little bit like Modern Jazz Quartet, the band, because it got vibraphone and they are just playing a lounge jazzy tune. I think there are brushes on that one as well. I kind of have that in my mind. I might be completely mistaken.
I like the creepy ending with the strings.
Yeah, are you sure these are strings? Wait, I wrote down that's an accordion cluster.
Oh, it could be. You probably know more than I do.
Nah, that's an accordion. That's an accordion playing a cluster, which is like just a fistful of notes.
Okay.
All bunched up together.
They do the same thing on the live version, and it sounds cool too. I'll mention about the lyrics. I think some of them are worth reading out just because they're so good. But I love particularly the. You were bred for humanity and sold to society. One day you'll wake up in the present day, a million generations removed from expectations of being who you really want to be. I think that's a really good line.
A little thick as a briquet, don't you think?
Yeah.
A son is born, and we pronounce him fit to fight.
Track 7, Bungle in the Jungle.
Well, let's bungle in the jungle. Well, that's alright by me. Yes, I'm a tiger when I want love. I'm a snake if we did.
So this one is the hit, I guess, from this song, this album, which it's really funny how this song is one of the biggest Tull songs, because I think it's also one of the least representative Tull songs. If you listen to this and try to imagine what the rest of this band's material sounds like.
That is true.
And it's not, I think this song was particularly big in America, like more so than other places, which is probably fitting because I think it's a very American sounding song. And there's been lots of times when I've met people, whether they're co-workers or whatever, who whenever I mention that I am a big fan of Jethro Tull, which by the way, very few people ever guess that Jethro Tull is an artist that I'm interested in. It's not something that's very, something that you would sort of guess when you meet me, I guess. But when I often tell people about it, they always bring this song up, and it's kind of embarrassing at this point. Because they're always like, oh yeah, you'll never guess my favorite Tull song. And I'm like, Bungle in the Jungle, and they're like, yeah. Because I know, it, to me, it's like a sign that you don't really understand this band, because Bungle in the Jungle is, you know, so different from what really makes Tull Tull.
Yeah, still a fun song, but yeah, I absolutely get what you mean. When I was a kid, this was the one song on that original Masters record that we used to have, this Soviet pressing of that I absolutely loved listening to because it had animal noises on it. And I think I mentioned it in our intro episode that I understood very little English lyrics at that point. I was like 8 years old or something, but I'm a tiger and I'm a snake I could roll with.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, that song was my jam.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this one. I think it's very basic for a Tull song.
Yeah, it's much simpler than the. It stems from the animal songs on Chateau,
right?
Or which are Look at the Animals and Tiger Tune, that Ian explored a lot of looking at people through the metaphor of different animals.
Yeah.
And in Bungle in the Jungle, he took all those ideas and rolled them into a different song. So it has musically, it has nothing to do with the Chateau recordings. It's just the same kind of themes that are explored. I do have a few things to say about the music on this one. First of all, I feel that the bass line in Bungle in the Jungle is delinquent. It's so good. It may not be immediately noticeable, but it's got so many little slides and little syncopations. I took some time yesterday to learn to play it, and it's immensely fun. And it just carries the song so well. Like, it hits all the right spots, and in between all those spots, it does like very unexpected things.
Yeah, I need to go back and listen to it because it's not standing out to me.
Yeah, it's, believe me, it's massively fun. There are a couple of covers of this bass line on YouTube, maybe more than two, but I looked at two. One of them was pretty bad, and another one was pretty good, even though the guy who's pretty good didn't play all the slides that I hear in it. Another musical thing in this, which is very fun, is that this song employs what is called in music theory a Picardy third, which is, I will explain, a musical device that's been around since Bach. And it is when a song in minor ends on a major chord, when everything has been in minor, and in the end everyone comes back to the tonic, sings the tonic, and the organist, instead of playing the minor chord, plays a major chord, and it sounds very uplifting and spiritual. And this is exactly what they do here at the end of the verse, because the verse is in minor, B minor specifically, and sleep in green me, doze on doze, they go major and transfer to major in the chorus. And then at the end of the chorus they go back to minor and it goes slightly darker, which kind of, I think, contributes to one of the things that contributes to why it was a hit, because it's a very kind of emotional moment. And it works really well subconsciously.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I can kind of follow what you mean. I'm not a big technical musicologist guy, but I I can kind of follow what you mean, I think.
Yeah, it's you can notice it if you know what to listen for for that change. It's immediately noticeable. But if you're not specifically looking for that or examining what happens in the harmony, then you won't notice. It's just the feeling that comes across when they do that, the color that they achieve, the uplifting sort of motion in the chorus that makes it sound happier and more upbeat.
One thing I wrote down on this one is that I totally forgot there was a bridge in it. So I kind of forgot what that sounded like.
Well, it's harmonically the same, so it's not, it doesn't take us anywhere else. It's just a kind of solo.
Yeah.
Over the same chords as the intro even. So it repeats the same thing. But what's also fun that in the intro we have a kind of a hanging note on the bass that generates a sort of expectations. I'm not sure how to explain that without illustrating it on the bass, which I don't really want to do right now. But the phrase that the bass is playing in the intro ends on a note that doesn't resolve anywhere. It just goes da 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 dum dum dum, and that dum 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 generates a lot of tension. While in the bridge, the bass is playing the same thing, but that last note is much more stable. It's just the fifth of the chord, and it just stays in the same place, no tension. It's much more relaxed and much more kind of storytelling feeling.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't really remember a lot about the bass. I just thought it followed the guitar, but I guess there's a lot more going on I wasn't paying attention to.
The guitar parts in this, well, don't tell Martin, but the guitar kind of interjections probably sound a little bit cliche to me.
Yeah, I mean, this whole song is cliche to me, so don't worry about that. So, I mean, Ian famously hates this song. I think most people know that.
I don't think he does. No, it's a little more complicated than that. I read about it in the track notes. He likes it. He doesn't like that he wrote it. He wants that someone else. He wishes that someone else had written it because it's a song more suited to someone else rather than him.
Yeah, I remember reading he was embarrassed about it. Sort of, I guess, embarrassed about the fact that he wrote it. But I mean, certainly, if they did play it on the WarChild tour, they never played it after that, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, still pretty fun number, but sort of maybe thematically, it feels very separate to me from the rest of the album.
Yeah, I think the first and second sides are quite different to me.
The second side is arguably slightly less cohesive.
Yeah. Track 8, Only Solitaire.
Brainstorming, habit forming, battle warning, weary when some actors spewing spineless children.
Once again, this is one of the songs I really love, and several things. Well, first of all, we just said that the album doesn't feel really cohesive. Only Solitaire, to me, because I spent so much time in my life with the Nightcap My Round tape in my Walkman, returning home from like classes and stuff. Only Solitaire feels to me like a song off of Nightcap and not a song off of WarChild, because
Yeah,
I
I
remember it very well. I can play it. And it's very short and kind of doesn't have overwhelming instrumentation, which is why I can play this song. I can imagine it start to finish in my head. And when I come to the ending part, but you're wrong, Steve, you see it's only Solitaire. What I hear afterwards immediately is the first chord, acoustic chord of Critic Oblique. Just dum, dum, because that's what follows it on Nightcap. I'm always a little bit taken aback by the hurrah on WarChild.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, wonderful song. 3 key changes is what I wrote about it. I examined what's going on in the harmony, and we're starting in B flat major, and then on the Bless Us All with His Oratory Prowess, we go to G major and spend some time there, build it up. And at the very end, we return to B flat major, but we don't play B flat. They don't play B flat. They land on C minor, which is the second chord of the B flat major scale. And we could imagine how this chord would resolve to C to F to B and generate a complete sort of resolution, but it never does that. But so it kind of feels like a different key, while we actually went to the same key we were before, but we are looking at it from a very different angle, and that's really, really cool.
Yeah, musically I really like this song, and I think it's actually among Ian's best acoustic songs.
Mm-hmm.
But I have an opinion about it which might be controversial. I don't know, so get
Go
ready
on.
for the... Yeah. The lyrics really bother me on this song.
Really? Uh-huh.
To the point where it kind of affects my enjoyment of it as a whole. And specifically, this is kind of an interesting topic because we were talking about this a little bit on Passion Play, but I think Tull and Ian specifically was highly reactive to critical reception of the band.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where, he was writing songs on WarChild that were like directly referencing critics by name and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And before I even sort of get into that, I just want to mention that it really makes me think of how irrelevant music journalists are today, because it seems like back in this time, people really waited to see what, say, the Melody Maker or the Enemy or whatever would have to say about the latest Tull album or the latest Two album or whatever. And today, there's not really a similar thing. We talked about Pitchfork and Anthony Fantano are kind of like the only two still relevant people in music journalism anymore who people actually look forward to seeing their reviews and that kind of thing. But I don't feel like it's the same. It's not like people wait for Anthony Fantano to tell them what's good or what's bad and that kind of thing, where I feel like, in that sense, print music journalism was more about like an objective reality of what's good and bad and that kind of thing.
I'm not sure about that, really, because yes, this song is very much a reaction to criticism, but it should be pointed out that this song is a reaction to criticism pre A Passion Play. It was written during Chateau, so even though it feels like sort of a rebuttal of the critic's reaction to A Passion Play, and it references the critic Steve, I don't remember the last name, but this was conceived before that. They didn't know that A Passion Play would be received that badly. And another thing, well, first of all, A Passion Play didn't have critical acclaim, but the listeners still liked it.
Yeah.
And during the tours were pretty successful. It was just the critics who sort of decided that this was not de rigueur anymore.
Yeah.
And another thing, at that time, music criticism wasn't really specialized, which is the sort of why it came out like that. The same people reviewed, it was all pop music, right? The same people would review Jethro Tull and, I don't know, ABBA.
Yeah.
And what made these critics qualified to make decisions on progressive rock and disco music at the same time, it kind of baffles me.
Yeah. I guess what I mean is that I feel like it would have been a big deal in the 70s if, say, the music press had a negative review of an album by a band.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like today it doesn't really matter as much.
Well, yeah, in that regard, I would probably agree.
Not to mention in the sense that just the number of music journalists are just so few now.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't even know, does Rolling Stone still review music?
It does.
Okay, because I guess that kind of proves my point. Is like I've never even heard anybody talking about a Rolling Stone review like my whole life,
Mm-hmm. No, I think I've read some Rolling Stone reviews and some music presented on Rolling Stone. Like I think the band Uni, by Charlotte Kemp Mule's band, presented one of their music videos on Rolling Stone exclusively at some point. Mm-hmm. Which I know because I follow them. So coming back to this song, the lyrics don't really bother me because they feel very self-conscious and very ironic, with a lot of self-irony.
Yeah, I didn't know about the fact that this was done before Passion Play. So I guess the quote from the Steve guy that Ian is talking about was about Thick as a Brick, I guess?
Maybe he's just referring to a general kind of imaginary review rather than...
Okay, I thought the story was there was some specific quote from the Steve guy about something related to cards or something, and that's what the Solitaire is supposed to be in response to, but maybe I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I must look this up. Also, chord jesting feels like sort of a reference to a grand chord jester in Backdoor Angels, which is, of course, the other way around. So Backdoor Angels references this song obliquely, invents some fool, some grand chord gesture, and this is the fool that appears in Only Solitaire, chord jesting, never resting.
That's interesting.
So yeah.
The spoken word at the very end is the thing that bothers me the most, I guess. And I know this is a word which people throw around a lot today, but it's very cringy to me, the whole spoken word addressing Steve by name thing. It's just one of those things that I feel like Ian would agree with this if you asked him. I mean, I can't speak for him, obviously, but sure. It's just one of those things that if I could go back in time, I would tell him, like, think about this. I don't think you want to do this, to point out this guy by name on your album. It just seems a little petty to me.
Well, I could quote Ian because I have his bit on Only Solitaire from the WarChild notes here. It was a childish riposte to negative criticism, of which I am deeply ashamed and slightly secretly proud. As it's actually quite a tricky little tune to play. So I'm not sure if he's referring to the fact that this is a difficult song and he's proud of that, or he's still slightly secretly proud of taking a sort of jab at critics, because, you could do that. He says that Steve also crops up at the end of A Passion Play, so this is kind of word of God on who Steve and Caroline are.
Oh, he says that, really?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Oh, with the shout of Steve, Caroline. Caroline was also a journalist, probably thinking back Caroline Coon, possibly.
Wow. All right, well, that's a mystery solved then. I've been wondering that for years.
Yeah, interesting that it's not there in the Passion Play notes, but it's there in here. Well, it is difficult to play. I tried, looking at what's being done on acoustic guitar there yesterday, and yeah, it is a tricky one. I think Stuart Wood does a brilliant job of that on his YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, I love that guy. He's cool. Track 9, The Third Hoorah. So, I don't have a lot to say on this one. I think in general the thing that's most apparent about it is sort of the march classical, like you said, Victorian influence is very strong on this one. The repeat of the lyrics from WarChild is quite interesting. I don't really know if there's any connection going on there, if there's supposed to be. I mean, some could criticize it and say it's lazy for them to do that.
Nah, it's not. I think it's basically a WarChild reprise, but it's a development of that, and I don't think it doesn't feel lazy to me. It doesn't feel like just reusing a part. It feels like adding on to the idea.
Yeah, it's quite catchy for some reason. It's kind of been in my head the past day. I don't know why. Yeah,
I know what you mean. I think in mine too, especially when falling asleep. In this, we're kind of going back to this sort of steampunk, diesel punk, post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic story that I'm imagining happening in this album. In this story, it's the kind of straightforward romantic notion of battle being explored by the characters that inhabit it. And just like WarChild, is the same kind of major with underlying minor peeping through the cracks, which adds slightly to the feeling of being not quite straightforwardly happy and a little bit deranged, which very, very much fits the lyrical theme.
Yeah. The bridge is quite interesting, where there's so much stuff happening with all the strings and bagpipes and horns and
drums.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a crazy sort of shift of accents. I figured it to be 12 in most of the time. I think the bar of 9 happening somewhere. But even within the bar of 12, they employ different feels, like a 3 feel versus a 4 feel. And it's kind of comes together, but it keeps you on your toes.
The main melody sounds very Celtic to me. Is what it reminds me of.
Yeah, I think the whole kind of a little bit Celtic and a little bit marchy. This song a little feels to me kind of Thick as a Bricky once again, in a very different way. It doesn't remind me directly of any of the songs on Thick as a Brick, any of the parts of Thick as a Brick, but kind of the overall feel, the overall place that it brings me to. It just could have been an offshoot of Thick as a Brick to me.
Yeah, I haven't thought of that. It sounds too light-hearted for me to be related to Thick as a Brick.
Yeah, well, it is light-hearted, but there's a little bit of derangement in there, which I feel existed and kind of colors it. as not one-dimensional, more than one-dimensional story or song.
When I think of this song, the main thing I think of, this is very kind of random, but just from over the years as I've shuffled through my Tull library, every now and then this song will pop up and I'll hear that little hurrah and then the da 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 da, and then I skip it. But so that's when I think of this song, I think of that beginning part. That's kind of what's burned in my brain of this song.
No, I don't think it deserves being skipped that much. It's a great one. Not sure I will call it one of my super favorites on this album, but this is not a bad song at all. It's really good.
Track 10, Two Fingers.
I'll see you as the weighing in when you like some turtles made and you say...
Well, this one is very much not off of WarChild.
Yeah.
Because it's not conjecture, it's just fact. This is a reworking of Lick Your Fingers Clean, which was an Aqualung session. And in the Aqualung bonus tracks, which are available on multiple releases, Lick Your Fingers Clean feels very much like a very kind of unpolished Aqualung session era track, while Two Fingers feels very much a WarChild song, music, like in terms of sounds that they employed. So they did a lot of things to it, which I like, because I like it more than Lick Your Fingers Clean. But
interesting.
Still, in the scheme of things, it feels to me like a bit of a cop out.
Yeah, I agree.
On this album, because it works as an epilogue, but it's kind of generic. You stick a song about death at the end of anything, and it will serve as a finale. But it doesn't feel connected to the rest of the album. So they did seem to run out of songs to put on it.
Which is sad, because I'm not super familiar with the bonus tracks / outtakes from this album, but one which I actually like a lot is Saturation, which is a song which was cut from this album. And just as a shameless plug, by this time when this episode comes out, I should have a drum cover of it on YouTube. It's a very good Barry Barlow part. Woo. But that's a very good song, and I think it would have helped this album to have that one on here. And I think it totally could have taken the place of this song, because I'm not a fan of this song. It's just kind of a reworked version of a song which technically already existed, but I guess, at this point it wouldn't have been released yet. But opposite to you, I actually prefer Lick Your Fingers Clean over this song. I don't know, this song isn't it for me.
Yeah, this is not by any stretch a track on WarChild that I like, but when comparing it to Lick Your Fingers Clean, I like it more because it's got more of this accordion saxophone kind of WarChildy sound. I like that the accordion is doing terrifying things in the intro to this one. Yeah, it's like a very fast arpeggio that is not really connected musically to the rest of the song, but it creates a kind of a frantic build-up. And it's kind of cool. Yeah.
One thing I wondered about this song is if the sound of falling glass, which is all throughout it, was supposed to be a reference to the T from the spoken word parts.
Could be. I don't know. That's a nice theory.
So now that we're sort of back to a normal album, we get to go back to our normal top 3, bottom 3 tracks.
Yeah, I think we did that. We did that on Thick as a Brick. Still, we called out our favorite and least favorite parts, but we didn't do that on A Passion Play. And I'm happy, because I would have straight up refused to call anything not a non-favorite part on A Passion Play. But yeah, here we can do that.
Well, I think we're going to have very opposite reactions here between you and me.
I kind of feel that there will be a couple of very similar places, but yeah, go on.
So top 3. The number 1 for me is Skating Away on this album. I think that's sort of a classic Tull song, and I think it's the lyrics are great. I think it's a great acoustic song. I think it's a better live, but still, I think, at its fundamental, it's a great song. Number 2, I have Only Solitaire. Even though the lyrics bother me, I still think musically it's a great song. It's one of the great Ian acoustic songs, even if it's a little bit short. And then lastly, I have Backdoor Angels, which was kind of the surprise for me, or the one that I was able to sort of latch on to after hearing it again last night.
Okay, and for me, this time I will surprise you. I do have a toss-up between some of the songs and the Third Hoorah, which is to me a very fun part. But for the occasion, I will call my favorite songs of this album Backdoor Angels, Skating Away, and Only Solitaire.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
That's the first time we match each other.
Yeah. I love the Third Hoorah. So at some point, well, in a certain mood, I would call that one a favorite as well.
Mm-hmm. My bottom three would be Two Fingers. I'm not a fan of. It's at the bottom for me. Queen and Country. It doesn't do much for me. It doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere for me. And it's one of those things where it kind of goes in one ear out the other. And then number three, I think this one's going to hurt you. Number three is Bungle in the Jungle.
It's not going to hurt me because I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you said that number three bottom is the bass line from Bungle in the Jungle, I would have been hurt. But no, I'm not hurt. And I agree, Two Fingers, bottom one. Then it kind of gets different for me because I don't want to hurt any one of the rest of the songs. But Queen and Country does have a very odd feel with the kind of stopping and resuming, not stopping and resuming, but the kind of a heavy groove. Even though, as I've been listening to this album a lot for the past few days, it's sticking in my head a lot. It's playing like involuntarily playing in my head when I'm thinking about other things. And yeah. Let's do this. Bungle in the Jungle, number three.
That's nice of you.
Yeah, that's it. The bass line is fantastic, and the use of Picardy third in that song is kind of cool. But otherwise, take it or leave it. You know, it's just it's not one I'm massively fond of.
Yeah,
it's just on the opposite. The things that I found in it kind of warmed me up to it a little bit more, but not enough to call it my favorite or anything.
Yeah. So you're able to discard your childhood memories.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I was interested in listening to this again just because I was so unfamiliar with a lot of it that I was kind of curious what my overall reaction would be. But I don't think it's really changed that much. I still mostly consider the album the same way I did before last night when I heard it again. It's not that impressive to me. It's still not a standout. It's definitely one of the worst 70s albums for me, and I would probably still call it my least favorite. For me, there's two albums of the 70s that are clearly on a level below everything else, and I think it's probably not hard for anybody who's familiar with the Tull discography to be able to tell what the second one is. But this is the one that I'm least interested in listening to of the sort of golden age Tull album still. Yeah,
I know what you mean. As I said before, this album still has a place in my heart, and it's good for what it is. I don't consider it to be a bad album. I will put it above either Stand Up or This Was in my personal ranking. I will.
Really?
Wow.
I'm
more interested to listening to this than I am to Stand Up.
Interestingly, I think John Evans in an interview somewhere mentioned that this was one of his favorite Tull albums and he thought it was quite underrated.
Did he elaborate on that, or was that just kind of...
I don't remember that well. I don't even remember where I read it. It may have been on the Tull boards or somewhere on there. But I remember him mentioning that he thought people didn't really give it a proper look.
I believe that he just had a lot of fun playing the accordion.
Yeah, it could be.
Unlike Andy Giddings, John Evans just got a feel for the German instrument from hell, aka the squeezer thing. But
the two things that surprised me the most when I listened to it were the difficult drum parts and the diversity of instrumentation on a lot of the tracks. Those were the two things I don't really remember from the last time I listened to it.
Yeah, that's what makes it kind of artsy, kind of... gives it an art rock kind of feel, kind of an exquisite sort of approach to songwriting.
Thanks for listening. As always, Vernacular Verbose, Jethro Tull podcast. We're having a great time going through the Tull discography, and I think probably, Eugene, you and me both can say we're quite excited for the next episode.
Oh, absolutely.
So see us in 2 weeks with Minstrel in the Gallery. Let us know what you think about WarChild. I don't really know what most fans think about WarChild, so I'd be interested to sort of read any of your comments that you guys have. Feel free to leave us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
See you. Cheers.
Thanks.